Anyway, we're on the,
Think they have it sorted out?
we're doing good.
Because the medical profession can be pretty frustrating. What I've found.
Is the clinical director for VOA in Wyoming and China. Is that veterans? What's Volunteers of America? It used to be Peak Wellness. Is that a private? No, it's not-profit. So it's a private, no? Yeah, oh, yeah.
Okay, if you don't mind, we'll call the roll and call the meeting to order.
Thank you, President Broussard. President Broussard.
Here.
Vice President Cavello.
Here?
Commissioner Torgerson. Commissioner Torgerson, are you joining us online?
He is online.
I believe he is online. Commissioner Bowl. Thank you, sir. Commissioner Schiffer.
Here,
Commissioner Rithaler.
Here.
Commissioner Cura.
here,
Commissioner Francisco.
here.
Thank you. Commissioner Wildcat. Here. Thank you. Appreciate it. Senator Driscoll.
Here.
Thank you, sir. Representative Newsom. Thank you. Governor's liaison Tom Lebanal is absent.
I'm here.
Oh,
I'm here.
Excuse me. I'm sorry. Thank you, sir. We have Mike Kaler from the Attorney General's office sitting to my right, attending today, and thank you.
Carry on with the welcome.
Yes,
and we'll
sir.
do the Pledge of Allegiance.
Welcome to the November 21st and 22nd, 2024 Annual Fall Meeting of the Wyoming Gaming Commission. The primary mission of the commission is the protection of the wagering public, the health, safety, and welfare of the participants in all lawful gaming and parimutuel activity. All meetings of the governing body of the agency are public meetings open to the public, except as otherwise provided pursuant to 16.4.403A. The meeting is being held via Zoom, is also available to watch via video streaming, and we appreciate having you here today. The commission may open an executive session at any point in the meeting pursuant to 16.4.405A, and inclusion on the agenda does not necessarily constitute a commission action. President Broussard.
Okay, if you guys wouldn't mind, stand up and joining me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I don't have comments other than it's good. We have a great turnout on this side. Awesome. And hopefully we can catch up with some of you guys tonight for a little more time. Hey, Sandy. Do you have anything, Cactus, to add? Okay, then we will move on to item number 2. And I'll entertain a motion to adopt the agenda. Thank you, Dick. Second? Wildcat, okay. Any discussion? Otherwise, we'll call the vote. All in favor of adopting the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, say nay. Thank you. Item number 3. The consent agenda. And I will approve the minutes from, that'll all be on the consent agenda. Item number 4 on this agenda, item number 13, and item number 15. Anything we'd like to discuss on that or make a motion to adopt?
Motion to adopt the consent agenda. Does that include item 4?
Item 4, yes. Item 4A and B. Item 4A and B.
President Broussard.
Yep.
The first motion would be to adopt the consent list as read, to be item 4A and B, item 13A through E, and item 15C. So if we have that motion, then we
Okay.
need a motion to adopt.
So Commissioner Bowl moved that, and Commissioner Francisco seconded. And if there's no, are there comments on that from anywhere? Questions or comments, or do we need to pull any of that out to discuss further? Not seeing any, we will call the vote. All in favor of the consent list, say aye.
Aye.
If If there's anyone opposed, say no. All right. Moving to item number 5, and that is, say again?
Now we have to approve.
Okay. All right, we have a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved, Mr. President.
I'll second that.
Any more consideration or discussion? Not seeing any, we'll call the vote. All in favor of adopting the consent agenda, say aye.
Aye.
If there's been anyone opposed, say no. Okay, now we're moving on to 5. Presentations. We have, the first one is Gaming Laboratories, item 5A. Are we queued up? Looks like it. Okay, so is this Joseph and Steve? All right,
Present.
Good afternoon.
welcome. So we'll turn it over to you.
All right, give me 1 second, make sure I got my screen up. Good afternoon. My name is Steve May. I'm here with Joe Bonnemuth. We're both from the government relations side at GLI, and we're asked to do a short presentation today just to kind of give some updates on what's going on in the historical horse racing world, what's going on in the sports gaming world, iGaming, anything that that could be on your agenda in the near future with the Wyoming Gaming Commission. First off, I wanted to say thank you for the opportunity today to participate in this meeting. We have a very long and very strong relationship with the Wyoming Gaming Commission. I've personally worked with Charlie and his team for well over 10 years now, and I've really enjoyed that. Charlie and I have really grown a lot together when it comes to historical horse racing, especially, and I really consider him a friend, and I know that's the way everybody else there in Wyoming feels about him as well. So let me try to get this up and running. Nick, it doesn't look like I have an ability to share right now. We have a short PowerPoint that we did put together. There we go. All right, is everybody seeing my screen now?
Everything good on this end?
Okay, good deal, good deal. So first off, just want to kind of give at least a brief update of GLI. You know, we are at a record testing at our organization now. We have had this phenomenal last couple of years, especially. We're now celebrating our 35th anniversary of operations at GLI. I currently have 27 global locations that we do our testing at, and we're up to around 1,700 employees, which is pretty amazing for a company that's still privately owned by the two same individuals that started the company. They still have the same goals and the same business drive for the operation. And the last 2 years have been especially good for our particular division. We did lose a key person at GLI, Kevin Mullally, who Charlie and his team know well. The whole gaming industry knew him well. He took off and went overseas to another operation and is leading them now. But our team is actually, I think, even stronger at this point. We've had a really good opportunity to focus our efforts on government relations, and I think we've done a phenomenal job over the last couple of years on this. So as you see, we're still same 24/7 operation, up to 567, I believe that's still correct, jurisdictions around the world.
700
that
now.
we are over 700 jurisdictions now that we are operating with now. So we are just cannot slow down a bit, and things are really going extremely well for us right now. So one of the things that Charlie had asked me for, and Nick as well, had asked me to do was just sort of an update on historical horse racing, kind of what has happened in the last couple of years and what to look forward to on the horizon. So historical horse racing is just a continuously powerful driver in the horse racing industry, and that's especially true in Wyoming. Historical horse racing now far outpaces wagering over live racing throughout the country at this point. So it is still growing. Kentucky is doing extremely well. Virginia is doing extremely well. Wyoming is obviously doing extremely well. And it has helped all of the horse industry in all of its different states. It's grown significantly since 2016, as we all know. That was kind of the introduction of the exacta system that brought about some complete system-wide changes on the Paramax system. And it also brought in the operations for Ainsworth and Castle Hill. It has then continued to grow because more of these operations now have shifted over from creating their own content to working on strategic partnerships with the entire gaming industry to bring their content over to the historical horse racing side. There's well over 10 providers now. I think there's at least, I think there may be around 14 different gaming operators that have brought their content over to the historical horse racing side because they understand the power of using totalizators, using the parimutuel system, and bringing that content over. It's a familiar content for customers, and customers have really enjoyed this. So HHR is about as strong as we could have ever imagined it, and it is still continuously growing. So the future of this just continues to develop. There's new and exciting things that we're getting in the lab at GLI. We're talking with the suppliers about on a continual basis, trying new things, just really trying to broaden the horizons of historical horse racing. And this is not really new. I mean, there's been alternative type gaming titles like Keno for a long time with historical horse racing that have had mixed success over the years. The suppliers have really tried various things to grow this, and so this is not a new thing. But with all of these, there's always, of course, that critical components of historical horse racing. We still want to make sure that there's handicapping options there, that they are displaying the races in some fashion, and that, of course, they're the pooling of the wagers and distributing that net pool to winners. So while we still see that, it is really interesting how the operator or the suppliers are trying to broaden this and bring in other options on this. They're using innovative pay structures for this that allow some of the similar type games that you see in the Class 3 world to have different pay structures on this. So they're really innovating with this, trying some new things with this. And they're also trying to use, expanding the use of these entertaining game themes. Again, we've used Keno in the past, but I think we're going to be seeing in the near future some roulette-looking games that are still historical horse racing on the back end, but have that option for a player to have that familiarity with other gaming operations. I mean, there's really no limit to this and the potential for this, at least. I mean, we could easily see craps. I think we could see blackjack. We could see a lot of different things that are always being brought back to that historical horse racing side. So having that is something that just gives gaming operators a more and more ability to use historical horse racing and provide this to customers out there. So really exciting areas on this. I want to keep this brief, obviously, because I want to respect the time of the commission, but just want to at least give a few things that we have seen in historical horse racing and that we will be seeing in the near future. I continue to work with Nick and Russ and everybody else there at the commission, and always there to explain these things and try to walk them through whatever there's any kind of questions on this, to always give that independent look from GLI at how these things are operating and the functionality of this. So again, we appreciate the opportunity today. I'm going to pass it over to Joe and let him take it from here.
Good afternoon, and members of the commission, and appreciate Charlie and Nick for giving this opportunity. So I just kind of have a general slide here. We lived this with you guys in Wyoming when we went through sports betting. This was the exact path. I remember my first day at GLI, Mr. Mullally, who hired me, put me on Charlie's call on YouTube. It was March 6th of 2021. And Charlie was like, well, we're going to have sports betting. It's going to happen because the legislation had hit. And then, we went through this entire checklist here. So it'd be the same type of checklist if iGaming were to come on. The only difference on this entire list for iGaming is there's no field verification other than the geolocation controls. But everything else would be, frankly, honestly, the same. Just kind of a simple list to show how that path goes. So here we have like the overview of a sports betting system. The reason why I have this is because this is what's currently happening in your market. The top half, you have your actual devices, you have your geolocation check, you have the player log in, they go through the know your customer, what we call KYC process, to make sure they're of age to be gaming in your state. And that is all located in the cloud. This is the applications that you download from the app stores. and they run all these checks to make sure, and this is all controlled, and this is all tested, and this is all certified by the ITLs. And at that point, once they get through and they are of age and they are in the state of Wyoming, they'll be able to deposit to their accounts. That's where the call to the payment provider is. Now they're showing the action, the content in the menu, and then they'll be able to place a bet. That bet is struck on a server in Wyoming. That's specific because of the Wire Act and how it was, I want to say, not, it was basically, how do I, the DOJ's last non-decision left the Wire Act to sports betting only. That's, I think, the best way to say that. And at that point, the bet is recorded, is the log, the timestamp, how much was bet, what was bet on, the price of that bet, when it'll be rendered or evaluated at the end. There's a sportsbook data feed that delivers all the content, and that's where the risk management system comes in, so they can see those bets coming in and change those prices of the lines. And if you had retail, there'd be no PAM. It would just be over the counter or kiosk type system. And the reason why I have this here, because I have Steve go to the next slide, is that your iGaming system looks very much the same. So technical control wise, technical architecture wise, the iGaming system mirrors the sports betting systems. In fact, the player account management systems, the geolocation controls, the KYC, the payment providers, and the devices, all that top stuff for most of the major providers are 100% the same if they have iGaming markets as well. It's really the content that's different. So they go through the technical controls, they go through the certification process nearly the same, except now instead of sports betting content, you have possibly a live dealer blackjack. I don't know if everyone's heard of live dealer before. It is a phenomenally successful product that is live in the 7 states that we have here in the United States. That would be Connecticut, Rhode Island, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware, Michigan, and I'm missing one. Live Dealer is a hybrid product where it actually has a live dealer broadcasting on a camera, and the players actually push their digital bets up and get dealt a physical hand, and everything is RFID'd and displayed. We test these, we audit those actual studios. A very popular product. There is digital blackjack, there is digital slot machines. So simply the content is different, but the architecture, the technical controls are the same. In fact, GLI 33, our venture wagering standard, which Wyoming adopted, and GLI 19, which is our iGaming standard, there's entire sections that are 100% the same. All the player account management controls and all the cybersecurity audit controls are the same, where the second part is where the content difference and how the bets are structured and recorded is different, because obviously event wagering is different from playing an online slot machine. So that's kind of the highest level overview, and obviously Steve can ship this deck over to Nick and Charlie post this call. So at this point,
and I will give my apologies to John Denver at the same time, because West Virginia was the state that he left out. So
that's
John
correct.
Denver would let down if he was with us today. So
sorry. So at this point, we take any questions from the commission.
Commissioners, do we have any questions for the GLI folks?
I think the point of Joe's presentation is that if you do get iGaming, and we really see this still expanding throughout the country, and we kind of tell everybody that already has sports betting, and especially online sports betting, to not be too afraid. You can handle this. It's something you're already handling extremely well. And so if it gets put on your plate, you'll actually be ahead of the game on this, because you've already been regulating online sports wagering for a while now. So
thank you. That's good to know. So any questions for these folks about what we have or what may be on the horizon? Dan? Commissioner Schiffer has a question.
Well, Gentlemen, somewhere in the reading that I've done the last few days, one of the recommendations were that our administrative rules be somewhat made the same for all the different types of gaming that we have going on in Wyoming. And I wanted to ask you if you thought that was a feasible idea and if you all had ways to accomplish that, if so.
Happy to address that. I think there's going to be fundamental differences in all of those that could not be the same, number one. But like with all of your land-based gaming, I think there's a lot of things that do make sense about having virtually identical regulations across there when it comes to the security and the audit checks, anything like that you do on any kind of land-based game. I think you should be doing on all types of land-based gaming. The same with online gaming. I think there's a lot of similarities. I mean, right now, all of these manufacturers are using a change management process to document when they're making changes, whether that's a critical change or a minor change. So I think if you do get iGaming, I think it would fall right in line with sports wagering as it is right now. So really, I mean, there's going to be fundamental differences, but I do think that for the most part, things can be harmonized across various gaming structures on that. Joe, you have anything to add on that?
Fully agree with Steve. We've had jurisdictions come to us to help work with that process and dig into the stuff that it's always better to use the stuff that you have already agreed on in other verticals in your market when you have a new market to come across. In fact, that we use the exact same process for when we were working with Charlie and Nick and the commission to bring in sports wagering. We originally went and looked at your existing rules and see what would also apply to your sports betting rules. And it's a challenge for every jurisdiction. Technology moves fast, regulations move slow. So it's a never-ending game of trying to continuously improve and make sure you protect the goals of your citizens in Wyoming.
Thank you.
President Broussard?
Yes,
I have a
go ahead.
question. This would be for Steve or Joe. Thank you guys for coming today. Do you see a higher prevalence of money laundering with the iGaming or the sports wagering online than you do brick and mortar?
I can take that question. So when it comes to AML and the digital operators in your space, these operators have a lot to risk. They have entire departments that run these. They have fraud departments as well. Specifically, iGaming versus sports wagering, it's the same risks. Back to the diagrams I brought up, they're using that data coming in through the KYC. They're using that data coming into who's betting where, who's betting what, and what kind of deposits and withdrawals being made. They can see this data. In fact, there's actually applications now, third-party applications built in-house that and even AI being used to track that action, graph what is like considered a normal behavior, and then alert the operators to what is outside the norm and trigger the investigation teams within their operations. So it's certainly a concern, but it's in your licensee hands in the end.
Thank you. Any further questions before we move on? Not seeing any. Thank you guys for giving up your time to educate us. Appreciate that.
Yeah, I just want one quick closure. I just again want to reiterate our respect that we have for Charlie and the friendship that we really have built with him over the years. I remember in 2016 when I was about to start with the Kentucky Horse Racing Commission, I kind of pulled Charlie aside and said, "Look, we kind of know each other, but we're really going to start working together a lot in the near future." And we really have. He and I have, we've learned so much by just calling and saying, "Hey, I saw this, I saw that. What are you seeing?" And I really appreciate that. He's taught me a lot. helped my career, quite frankly. And we really do appreciate the partnership that we have with them. And I know he's handed it over to a great guy with Nick. We really look forward to working with him as well and continuing this partnership that we have. So thanks a lot, Charlie, and thanks a lot, Nick.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, and I wholeheartedly agree with Steve.
Thank you. So we're going to move to item 5B. Do we need a minute to shuffle anything? Okay. We'll take do we need a extended
Commissioner
break?
Schiffer, would you like to be introducing your?
Sure.
You're the one that sucked him into coming here today.
Well,
We're very fortunate to have him.
I happen to serve on a board in Southern California called the Southern California Equine Foundation, which is the group of veterinarians on the racetrack at Santa Anita and Del Mar. President of the foundation is Joe Dowd, who's kind enough to come here to beautiful, lovely, windy Wyoming today. And I know his CV is in your packet, but there's a great community of veterinarians who work together at these racetracks. And fortunately, with the help of both Santa Anita, Del Mar, have been able to set aside a part of the backside for a surgical hospital, which Joe oversees. It includes both cutting-edge modalities and that are used for techniques to assess injuries and problems, and also surgery and rehab of the equine athletes. There's been a lot of funding and various things that have gone into getting this thing to where it is. And that community has been very fortunate with the support from horse racing people that have helped it along its way. But, it really has created for optimum care for our equine athletes and created a great working environment for the equine practitioners. And, Joe has been a really super steward to see that this thing is together along with the great people who work there, but also he's really worked hard to, get funding for the different modalities, help get funding and steer research projects that are done with and are ongoing to help keep getting better at helping our horses on a better path. So anyway, Joe's a great guy, and so glad he could come and appreciate it. And I think he's got a real interesting presentation for you all.
So real quickly before he starts, we do have a couple of veterinarians in the audience here. If you've got questions,
This is your time.
please jump up. Anybody? Thank you.
Commissioner Schiffer, thank you for the introduction. It's my pleasure to be here. Commissioners, my pleasure to come and tell you a little bit about what we've been doing since about 2020 to improve the safety in racehorses in Southern California. Here are the topics I'm going to cover, and one of the topics I'm not going to cover. Number one, I'll talk a little bit about racehorse safety. That's the safety of the surface, really not my area of expertise, but I have a way of simplifying things, and I think I can give you a little bit of nugget of information there. There's also a lot of restrictions, regulations, exams that have been newly implemented. A lot of these things have helped improve the safety of horses. I'm not going to talk much about those today at all. I'm really here to talk about our advanced diagnostics. Commissioner Schiffer and I have played a role in acquiring. We had these on our radar screen for quite a while because we do a cost analysis and we look at the new things that are coming down the pike. And we really wanted MRI and we wanted PET scans. We were limited a bit by funds, and I'll say that, when California got into trouble with racehorse fatalities, that helped push us over the top, and we were able to get the funding we needed to acquire some of these things. lastly, I'm going to talk also about some emerging technologies, and I'll tell you, they're kind of what we call wearables. You know, you put them on the horse and they beam back data from the horse. I think it's a really interesting emerging area. I'm convinced it's an area that all of us will use to improve safety in the future. My little spiel on safety of tracks, you know, there's synthetic tracks versus dirt tracks. There's a lot of debate about the two. I think the big thing about synthetics is there's some statistics that suggest they're safer for horses. And at least in terms of fatalities, those numbers are probably true. We probably see a lower fatality rate on synthetic tracks. When it comes to injuries, nobody's really documented that. And there's some debate that there may be some injuries that are indeed caused by synthetic tracks that we don't see on dirt tracks. But nonetheless, they do seem to be safer. And get right down to the bottom of my message is horses run on a racetrack, and the track has two components. It has a cushion, and that's the surface that the horses run over. I'm sorry? Hold it closer. You got it. Okay. Very good. So the racetrack is made up of two components, the cushion that the horses run over, and then there's a base that supports the cushion. And so the real key to keeping a racetrack as safe as possible is to keep that cushion homogeneous, if you will, lacking variability. Because when a horse is running at high speed, and when you and I are just walking down the street, if we're not paying attention and we just misstep, and our mind and our musculoskeletal system isn't ready for our foot to land where it does, then all hell can break loose and we can injure ourselves, even at low speed. So you got to appreciate a horse traveling at high speed who visually thinks he's always going to hit the same piece of ground, and suddenly it's not quite there. So consistency is the big key. And in synthetic was developed originally as its purpose was an all-weather track, so you could run in all sorts of rainy weather. And the reason for that, and the surface stays pretty consistent because the track, the cushion is milled. It isn't just soil, it's milled, and all tracks are mostly sand, but milled into that is precise percentages of fibers, rubbers, plastics, different things are used for different tracks, but also polymers and waxes that help water go right through. And when it gets to the base, well, the base is different too. It's a type of hard, big rock, civi, they call it macadam, I think, if I'm pronouncing it right, but a type of asphalt. The water passes through the cushion, sieves right through that asphalt to a drainage system that then takes it away. So I think one of the things that's really improved safety for racing in California is that we have rules now that don't allow racing when the racetrack's very wet or inconsistent. And I think that's made a big difference. And the reason is we tend to keep the water out of the track, the dirt track, by sealing it, okay? And you seal it hard, and so when the rain hits it, then most of it goes to the inside gutter and is taken away. But if the racetrack does get penetrated with water, then it has to dry. And that's where you get variability. And the variability comes from a lot of things. It comes from hillsides that might shade parts of the track, especially in winter, tall trees, grandstands. Anything that shades the sun from getting full contact in certain areas is going to create variability. And that's where you get into trouble. So I think synthetic, by being water tolerant, if you will, is probably a safer track for horses year round. But any track can be safe. A dirt track can be safe if you just keep it from having variability, keep it all homogeneous. So injury and diagnostics on the racetrack, I'm going to focus on the fetlock, which is the ankle, and I'm going to give you a little anatomy to bring everybody up to speed. But the ankle is important because 85% of our catastrophic injuries in our horses occur in the ankle. So we already know where to focus a lot of our attention. And then 85% of fatal injuries have this pre-existing pathology. So this has been known for 25 or more years by all the necropsy work that's been done on racehorses. It's been documented. The problem is we can't see the pre-existing pathology most of the time. So we've never had diagnostics that could visualize this, and it's important to see it because what horses apparently do is they suffer minor injuries. Think of them as like a microfracture in very minute areas of bone. And then they keep training and they keep training, and the injury, despite trying to repair itself, can worsen over time. Unbeknownst to us, there may be no sign of lameness, and then we have a fatal breakdown. Perhaps the sesamoids give way or the pastern gives way in this ankle. There are components of the ankle, and now we have a fatality. So we really needed diagnostics that would allow us to see these pre-existing injuries that are responsible for leading to 85% of our fatalities. And standard X-ray is still the gold standard. It just can't see that small of a lesion. There just isn't enough contrast there to be able to pick it out with an X-ray. So this slide just shows a horse probably at a sale, breezing near the end of the breeze, and you'll find a million pictures like this on the internet, but it just accentuates the hyperextension of the ankle. I wish I can use my pointer here a little. It doesn't show on the screen, but the arrow is pointing out the ankle, and you can see that that ankle is hyperextended due to fatigue at the end of a work or a race. And so you can imagine this whole 1,000+ pound animal and rider supported briefly by this very fragile joint. It's a lot of stress there. And so that's why we have so much concern about it. This is just a picture, again, to make sure everybody knows where the ankle is. It's circled in red here on the right, but the horse has 4 of them, 2 in front and 2 behind, and it's that place where the limb takes a little bit of an angle forward. And the front ones and the hind ones, radiographically, they look the same. They've evolved, the horses evolved such that you almost can't tell the two apart on an X-ray. So here's on the left, skeletal overlay on a horse, and you can see in my friendly red circle there pointing out the fetlock joint. And I hope you kind of appreciate how small this joint is relative to the rest of the horse. And again, the whole horse is riding on it. And then over on the far right, I've got a circle around the fetlock, but next to it is a picture straight from the back of the horse, and you see those 2 egg-shaped sesamoid bones. So you've got those 2 sesamoid bones. They're not but 3 to 4 centimeters long, paired there. They're attached to the suspensory apparatus, which comes off the back of the knee. I wish I could point that out, but that's that row of stacked cuboidal bones above, and you see that white ligament coming down. And all of that force I showed you in that slide is supported by that suspensory ligament, which attaches through the sesamoids and then down to the foot of the horse. And so all of that has to support that weight of the horse momentarily in the gallop. I think I beat that up enough in terms of anatomy. I'll show you this video of a CT volumetric look at the ankle, and you can see the 2 sesamoids there, and you also see in the front this area, the sagittal ridge. It passes all the way through here, and that's significant to me because it acts like sort of a screwdriver because it inserts in a groove on the pastern bone just below it. And while it gives stability to the horse when he's running, if there's any kind of bad step, and there's that word, bad step, some people don't want to hear it anymore, but a horse can take a bad step when he hits uneven ground, and that drives a very high energy force down into the pastern bone that can result in a real disaster. So I just come back again just to reiterate how much hyperextension is going on at that ankle and how much weight has to be supported there. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this pre-existing injury I mentioned earlier. It's very important to understand that, yes, pre-existing injury is real, and it's there 85% of the time, but there's another 15% of the time that's unaccounted for. And I think if you talk to the people that have done all the research, they're the ones that generated this number in the publications, 85%. When that filters down into some of the regulatory people, and people like to make things as simple as possible, I certainly do, they say it's all pre-existing injury, and that's just not true. In my opinion, that's just not true. So identifying and risk assessing these injuries we see, particularly with advanced diagnostics, has been a big part of our improved safety. I'll tell you a little bit about a study that we did recently through the Dolly Green Research Foundation, which is a little worrisome, but don't worry, because we have the tools to solve the problem. That's the message I want you to know. A lot of things look tough and hard to overcome and cumbersome, but the good news is the tools are there. And what we did in this study, we took horses that were doing well. So we went to the racing forum, we found horses that just won their last race, and we went to the trainer who trains them, and we said, what do you think of your horse? He said, he's great, okay. Let us look at the horse with a third-party vet, if you will, and we did, and the horses looked fine. So we got everybody who had any association with the horse to check off that the horse was doing perfectly fine. I think we had about 25 horses in that study. And what we found, it hasn't been published yet, but what we found was a low percentage of those horses had pre-existing injury. A low percent. Such that we needed to talk to the trainers and say, hey, you might want to take some caution here. We're seeing this, okay? The horse is heading down a pathway that may not be good. And the good news is all they have to do is stop and give these horses time to heal, and they're going to be fine. But it paints out, it shows that not all horses that appear perfectly fine are perfectly fine. And so it lends this advanced diagnostics to a thing called screening, which is a word I like to use a lot. We need to screen horses. And I'm here to tell you today that screening is coming. If you're going to be a racetrack at the top of the game in this country, you're going to need to screen horses to prevent injury, to keep the horse acceptable to the broader American public. And so you do that with some techniques I'm going to talk about, namely nuclear scintigraphy and PET, which are two radiographic or radiologic techniques that we use. That's in the wrong spot. But anyway, I talked about pre-existing injury, and I'm going to show you a couple places where it occurs. Areas of common pre-existing injury are shown by the red circles. And what I want to show you on the right by that long black arrow is that the view that you have on the left is just that. You're looking on the left, you're looking head on through the fetlock joint, which is a fetlock opened up on the half shell, as the pathologists like to say, in a necropsy. And those red circles, two above, two in the middle, they're commonly paired, are the areas that show up as pre-existing injury in horses. So what I want to tell you, though, is that the ones on top, those two paired lesions on the end of the cannon bone, up here at the top, okay, they're not a big deal by and large, okay? I call them kind of occupational disease in racehorses. You see it in a lot of the animals that go to PET scanning. There's a spectrum of injury there, but you know, if a horse has a little uptake there and he's running next week, he's okay. You may have to stop at some point and address it, but by and large, when we see it, it isn't that big of a deal. But the ones that are shown on the sesamoids have been well-known, well-documented areas for pre-existing injury that predispose that horse to bilateral fracture of both sesamoids, so breakdown. And that's what we have to avoid. And what I want to show you on the right with the two red circles is that those two areas, one not very serious, and the other quite serious, when you have uptake there, when you have a positive for a sesamoid bone on a PET scan, you need to stop right then and there. In my opinion, you stop. Give that horse time to rest. The other thing I point out is that sagittal ridge with the black arrow, the double arrows at the top. You see how that ridge of bone sticks up? And it inserts in the pastern bone at the very bottom. And if that horse takes an awkward step when he contacts the ground, that sagittal ridge can act like a screwdriver in a screw head and just blow that pastern apart irreparably. And that's what you see here in this X-ray. And And this isn't even the best example I had. I couldn't find the x-ray I wanted that had been necropsied and everything else, but they'll be in many, many pieces. The horse can't be saved most times. And it's just, I think anyone could look at that and say there was a lot of energy released there when that bone fractured, all the pieces and all the sharp edges. So those things can ultimately result in a breakdown, which is what we see going on in the left front here. And I hate to show this kind of slide, but it's reality and it's what we're all aiming to avoid. And like I say, the good news is we have the tools to avoid it most of the time. So I'm going to go through the advanced diagnostics that we use, and one computed tomography we don't have yet, but these are how we attack the problem. For one, nuclear scintigraphy at the top, we've had for 30 years. It is the workhorse of our advanced diagnostics. It's a 2D technique, so it's somewhat, 2D is a little lower resolution, make it simple, but it can see the whole horse. And that's what makes it still so powerful, because there's certain areas of the horse up high where there's a lot of body tissue where you just can't x-ray. It's too big a mass of tissue. And so nuclear scintigraphy is the only thing that can provide us imaging there. And then we have PET scanning, which is a 3D technique. I'll talk about that more. MRI, 3D technique. I'll talk about that. And CT, which we don't have yet, but the technology is still being developed, and we have our eyes on it. And when the cost-benefit ratio is there, we'd love to have it, but it isn't critical, in my opinion. And then X-rays are a 2D technique that still are a gold standard, but like I said, don't allow us to see a lot of these pre-existing lesions. This is what we call nuclear scintigraphy, and this is in our facility. It's a 2D technique. You see that tube attached to the hydraulic arm, and that simply moves around the horse, and it has to gather an image for a couple minutes. Every part of the horse moves all around. Probably takes about an hour to cover the whole horse, but importantly, it lets us see the whole horse, and so that's its real advantage. Here's some nuclear scintigraphy, and I have a skeletal outline on the left, and on the right I have the results of a nuclear scintigraphy. And if you look at the upper left two images that were labeled right and left scapula, I think you can see the outline of the scapula you see in the schematic on the left. And so you do see an outline of the bone. You don't get structure, but you see an outline of the bone because it has a pattern of taking up this radioactivity. But if you drop down where we have the right and left humerus, you'll see, and that's in the middle row on the left, you'll see a hot spot designated by the red arrow, okay? That's a humeral stress fracture, and that's an area we really can't x-ray real well, but that's a definitive diagnosis for a humeral stress fracture. The horse needs to come out of training, and if you look over to the right, just to the right where it's labeled left humerus, the red arrow points out no black spot. And so that's what you do. You compare the two sides, and you find these areas of bone uptake. And you talk about risk assessment. Where that lesion sits is not that dangerous to the horse. But if that lesion is more proximal, higher up on the leg, we know that's super dangerous. That horse can't even go out and canter because he could have a catastrophic failure of his humerus, and just things that we've learned over the years. I'm going to move on to PET scanning, a 3D technique, and the imager here, if you will, is this donut that the horse has his left foot in, okay? And that travels on a gantry up and down the horse and gives us an image of that whole distal limb. I said it can't look at his pelvis. You can't get that little machine on his pelvis or his neck or his vertebral bodies, but it gives us a lot of information in that area where 85% of our problem lies, right? Just another picture of it on both front and how high up it can go. We just added that feature, and then now I can give you a whole picture of the limb in one fell shot. And that's what you see here, front limb on the left and a hind limb on the right. And if I put this in motion, you'll see we can spin it around and look, and this is the hind limb we're looking at, and the horse has hock disease. He has some sort of bone activity in his hocks. Not a serious problem, but it's a great way to image it. Other things, other issues are definitely serious, and I'll show those to you. Here is a horse, a filly, that was being worked up in preparation for the Breeders' Cup. And the trainer came to us and said, you know what? This filly's had some issues in the past. You know, we bone scanned her last year. She was fine. And she's gotten along, but the regulators are starting to look at her and they're not comfortable with her. So he says, I'm comfortable with her. She examines okay to me. But let's work her up ahead of time so we could provide this as evidence to the regulatory people at the Breeders' Cup that she's indeed safe. And so we did a nuclear scintigraphy first, and I told you nuclear scintigraphy is a little lower resolution. So one of the things we found on the left hind fetlock was a hot spot. But we see one hot spot, and that could be that lesion I told you about that doesn't cause much of a problem. It's on the back of the cannon bone. Or it could be right next to it in the sesamoid, which is a big problem. So we see concern on the nuclear scintigraphy, so we elected to go to a PET scan, and that's shown on the right, and I'll just leave the still picture there, but to the left are two paired spots, and those are those pre-existing lesions that you find on the end of the cannon bone. They're no big deal. If that's what she's got, she's okay to run. I'm comfortable with that. But to the right, you see that larger spot, and it was indeed paired. You find it in the other sesamoid when you put that thing in motion. And that's in the sesamoid bone. That's dangerous. She couldn't run. And I say that trainer, he took it like a sport because there was a lot of money on the line, but he wanted to be sure she was safe. He didn't want to take any chances, and I don't blame him, especially on a big stage like that. You don't want to be taking any chances. There it's in motion, and you can see there's two pairs of spots. One is of low significance, but the other one is an area we know is prone to failure of the sesamoid bones. Here's that same picture again. And you just see, that's how we look at them. And also being a 3D technique, we can cut them up into 3 dimensions. I'll run through this real quick. This is a knee I did this summer, so that's just above the ankle. The knee can have catastrophic failure as well, although it's at a lower incidence. And the left knee, which is shown on the left picture, has a big bright spot in it, right? I mean, you guys can diagnose that. I just tell you, look for the bright spots, and you can see this horse has a problem. But most problems in the knee that light up the PET scan are related to chips around the edges of the joint. I'd say 98% of them plus, okay? And so that's not a big deal, okay? The horse can live with that. But this is right in the center of the bone. And so, see if I can spin that. And you can see that cuboidal structure of the knee there as it spins around, and we can really locate this. It's an unusual lesion. We need to stop because that's an occult fracture, and we x-rayed this horse. The horse x-rays perfectly. But that lesion, if we enable that horse, if we treat that horse with anti-inflammatories in the articular space, knock down the pain, the horse will go on and run just fine. But if we keep on that enabling process, we run the risk of that bone failing. And when that bone fails, the other bones around it like to fail. And now you've got complete instability. And you're losing a horse. So here I just took a model of the knee and those cuboidal bones you see in the carpal joints. That's the other name for the knee. Those 2 rows of cuboidal bones, and the lesion was in one of those bones pointed out on the right. And I want you to appreciate how small of an area that is. But it's the start of a big problem, and so we need to stop. The good news is the horse needs nothing else but rest, and he's going to be fine. And we headed off a disaster. You talk about the resolution of these techniques. This is just showing the 3-dimensional slicing that you can do with all of the 3D techniques. And so we took the PET scan, and we can slice it 3 different ways to very accurately locate where our lesion sits. So to sum up the PET, it's sensitive. It finds very small lesions with very high resolution, okay, higher than the nuclear scintigraphy. It's very specific to the location of the lesion, And it's very rapid, and this is the big advantage of PET. It's very quick. You can do a horse's all 4 limbs in the matter of minutes. And the horses can come in the morning, they can be scanned in a matter of minutes, they go to a decontamination stall, and they go home in the afternoon. So it's an excellent tool for screening the entire population of horses, and this is what I see coming. We're going to be screening all horses. They don't need to be screened that often. We're working that out, how often they need to come in for evaluation, but it's coming. A lot of people don't want to hear it, but it's coming. This is something Commissioner Dan and I hope he's as proud as I am, but you know, when we developed PET, the foundation, they gave them the first dollars to build a machine. There was no machine invented yet, but we had the evidence. We thought they could do it, and they did, and now it's swept the entire U.S. It's not come to Wyoming yet, but I'm sure it'll be here soon. And also Australia is using it for the Melbourne Cup in particular to make sure that those horses are safe before they run. This is a picture of MRI, which doesn't use radiation. It uses a magnet that excites water molecules in the tissue, and then they give off a radio frequency, and that all adds up to an image. We have it. This is ours. It's great, but it's not as high a resolution as like you and I would get if we went into a hospital, because it's all about the size of the magnet. And when you're using it, looking at a standing horse, you can only get so big of a magnet, so you can only catch the picture in so long a period of time. You'd like to get the image real quick, because then you have less distortion and whatnot. And the horses, frankly, won't stand that long. They start to move, and then that affects your picture. But when we just need one joint or a pair of joints, MRI is a beautiful technique. And this is the kind of 3D pictures that it generates, and it shows areas of inflammation. It basically shows where the water is going. The water goes where inflammation goes. But it also gives structure, and you can see fractures, which you can't see with those other radiological techniques. CT is something we don't have yet. It's higher resolution than an X-ray, but it's really like a glorified X-ray, if you will. It allows that 3D imaging where we can slice and dice the image. And when you can do that, when you can break down your image into a thinner slice, then you can see a lot of things that you can't see in a standard radiograph. Here are the 2 techniques. Now, you and I, if we go into the hospital, we get the one on the right, what's called fan beam. And so they feed you into a donut on a gantry, and you slide you through, and you sit still, and they gather the image in slices, and then they reconstruct it. It's tough to put a horse in the donut, so the newest stuff coming out is called cone beam, and it's not quite as sensitive yet, not as good of resolution yet, but it tackles that problem of the standing horse, because with all these techniques, trainers and horsemen, they do not want to anesthetize the horse to get a diagnostic. And I understand that. We thought about getting a fan beam that you can anesthetize the horse and slide the limb in, but we got a negative feedback on that. People don't want to have to do that. So cone beam on the left is going to be the CT of the future for horses. So this is a horse with a limb in a standing fan beam. In a fan beam, it's adopted for humans, but I don't think I need to say much about this. Maybe awkward comes to mind, or cumbersome, because you get that horse's limb in there, and then the gantry still has to move it, some distance to acquire the image, and that's, it takes a good crew, very limited credit for trying, but it's tough. This comes from University of Pennsylvania, and it's a cone beam. There's a detector plate mounted to a robotic on the left, and then the X-ray beam comes from the robotic on the right, and they're just setting up to get a CT of a distal limb. This is all at University of Pennsylvania. And different standing cone beam CTs work different ways. Some come up out of the floor. But we're watching all of them, and I just thought this was really cool to show you where the technology is at there. This is the kind of picture you get from CT. Like I said, you could slice it and dice it, and you think of my arm, and you can do this with it, cut it in this plane. You can cut it straight across in this plane, or you can cut it from side to side. And that's exactly what we're doing here. cutting it in 3 different planes. And that allows you to see what you wouldn't see in an X-ray. You can see more detail. And in the center of all this, that arrow points out a chronic fracture. Also on the right, you see image of a chronic fracture. I don't think you'd see that in an X-ray, and that's why this comes from Matthew Sprier's lab, a publication from his lab at UC Davis. But that's what you get. And so I'm convinced you've got some pathology going on there, and radiologists would probably argue about, is it a fracture, is it healed, is that the best it's going to get? But the really neat thing they're doing now called co-registration, where they superimpose the PET data on top of an X-ray or an MRI or a CT scan, as they did here. And in the lower 3 pictures, you see that fire-hot pastern bone that tells you that, no, this isn't healed. It's hot with bone activity, and it needs more time to set up. So that's it for advanced imaging. I'm going to close with a quick whirlwind of some of the emerging technologies that I know about. Personally, I use the Equinosis lameness locator. And then the other 2, the one on the left is the Stride Safe you may have heard about. It's being used in New York and Kentucky at the racetrack. And then Araneo on the lower right is another wearable device that gives cardio data. It gives an EKG and fed back. So the thing all 3 of these things do, their platform is wearable device that beams back to an iPhone or a laptop or a tablet, and you sit there and you gather data. Here's what it kind of looks like. They all similar. It's some sort of tablet and some sort of sensor that beams this information back. This is the lameness locator. We're using it here. We got one detector on the head, tells us about the front limb. One detector over the pelvis tells us about the hind limbs. An accelerometer on the right front limb that tells us where the limbs are, so we can put all the data together. But we can hook it up real quick and run this. And here's just one case we did with a horse that came in from the farm. The trainer had him about a month. And he said, you know, I see this horse off with a rider on at the track some days, not always. He says, when I get him out on the road, and we jog him, he's not off. He said, I want to know what's the matter with him. So we looked at him in the road, and you know what? We agreed he was a touch off, but not enough that you could consistently see it, and then we could block him by putting local anesthesia in an area and try to block the lameness out, and be convinced ourselves that we had hit the nail on the head. So we put him on the lameness locator, and the wheel on the left is the front limbs. That's all I'm going to talk about. But those blue lines that you see here are each and every stride, and it tells you how much asymmetry there was in that stride. And he has asymmetry because the normal range is this gray circle in the center. And so he has asymmetry. It's subtle, but it's there, and the machine picks it out and confirms our suspicions that this horse has a low-grade lameness. So he had some symptoms to the knee, so we put some anesthesia in the knee joint. And what you're seeing on the right in that wheel are a bunch of random little rays, a few of them that get outside the range of normal, but that's because there's variability in how the horse travels. But I should have told you earlier that the average of all the strides is this red line, and that's the average, and that's beyond normal on the left. So we got a lameness, and look where the red line goes on the right. It falls into the center of the gray circle like a bullseye. So the horse is sound. You know, we used a measuring device to determine he's sound, and we created a record now. It's not this subjective, oh, I saw him on such and such a day, and people might not believe you when he gets to the farm and do something else. We send them this record, and they go, oh, on that day, that's what these guys saw. So it's really cool, and I think of it like a scale. If you took your dog into the veterinarian and he needed a serious heart drug that you needed to be dosed accurately, would you want him to guess at the weight of your dog? Well, he's about 30 pounds, or you want him to put it on the scale and figure out how much the dog weighs? This one, Araneo, is a technology wearable. You see it on the girth there in the red circle, and it beams back all this data, stride data, speed data, all data that's useful to prevent injuries. We just haven't developed it all enough to know exactly how to use it. But what's really interesting is the cardio data, because one problem we have on the racetrack now, since we've suppressed all the breakdown type injuries, there's always been heart attacks in racehorses in training. They happen at a low frequency, but they've been happening since the beginning of time. And I think people thought they could regulate and change medications and this would go away. It won't, because when you train horses, some small fraction of them are going to drop dead every year. And so this now lends a way we can attack that, because I think every horse that's in training should have an EKG like this. And then when he drops dead, somebody's going to drop dead in that population on the racetrack. We'll have EKG data on him as a starting point to know what might have gone wrong. So I also think when we learn more about pushing horses, we'll learn to prevent injury, because I talked about that hyperextension injury in the fetlock and how it can cause chips at the front of the fetlock. It's very common. And people say, oh, that horse, he's got a chip, but we're going to do an arthroscopy, take it out, he'll come back 6-8 months from now. Well, that's cost. It's loss of the horse's racing days. Okay, he's now an older horse. And to me, a lot of horses, if the chip is of any size, a lot of them aren't the same horse. And so they're out there, they'll perform for you, but they won't perform at the same level they would have with that injury in there. And I can tell you, about that, think of the ankle as like our elbow. And if a surgeon took a chip out of your elbow, like similar in size to the ankle of a horse, I would bet you'd be reminded about that chip every day for the rest of your life. You're going to feel it, okay? It's a significant, the horse can deal with it, we can deal with it, but it lowers them in class. And so the last thing I want to talk about comes from my friend, Dr. Dave Lambert, who's a physiologist who's always been looking at ways to evaluate horses with technology. And he has this thing called Stride Safe. He's one of the principals, I suppose, in the company, but horses in New York and Kentucky are using it. And it's an interesting wearable technology. Sits under the saddle towel where the white arrow shows, and it beams back data. And it's kind of, think about it the same way as the 3D data in imaging. It just records the horse's movements in 3 different planes while he's galloping or working, or I should say working or racing. And so all the race horses were wearing these in Saratoga one summer. And still, Saratoga and Kentucky are the hotbeds for this technology. I sure wish we get started with it in Southern California. But I'll show you the kind of data it gives you. It gives you a trace, okay? And I told you 3 different directions, so you get a trace of 3 different directions. As you follow these horses out over time, they refer to this as a footprint. And as you follow horses out over time, sometimes the footprint changes. And when the footprint changes, that's interpreted as the horse is getting himself into some trouble with injury. So they've developed a system they call the traffic light system. And basically, when the horse hits a critical level, as I understand it, he comes off the track. And now the horse has to go through diagnostics to determine what might be the matter with him. If he passes all those diagnostics, I suppose fine. But it really is a hard stop when they get to a certain critical level where they approach the trainer and they say this horse really shouldn't train. If the fingerprint doesn't change, then everybody's happy. This is my final slide. It's been kind of nice to summarize all this, because what is the most important? If you can't have everything, what's most important? And I would say the must-haves are a well-maintained surface. Whether you have dirt or synthetic, you got to keep it well-maintained and consistent. The surface needs to be consistent. I think you must have nuclear scintigraphy because it covers the whole horse. You know, the horse gets injuries in area. The only way to see it is with nuclear scintigraphy. Highly recommended is the PET scan, and I think the PET scan is going to move up because, as I said, I think you're going to be screening all horses in a population of racehorses. Nice to have the other technologies I talked about, but I'm really optimistic with these software-based technologies, these wearables, because I think there's a lot of data there to be gathered and is really going to help us in the future. So thank you very much.
That was incredible. I feel like I was watching Discovery Channel. Do we have questions for the doctor? Yeah. Just, or pass him the mic, one, two.
Thank you. Dr. Dowd was talking about some of these things, and I just had some questions. With the fetlock and the injuries we have there, how much weight do you put on flexion of that fetlock? I mean, the decrease in flexion that you have with some of these older thoroughbred horses, at what point do we say, hey, you can't do this anymore? You know?
I think, yeah, how much is too much? It's a great question, and I think, I'll just, in short, I'll say a lot of that is, you probably agree, is a lot of soft tissue. Could be a major component. But if that horse passes a PET scan, I'm okay with him. Yeah. We had a horse come out from Florida who just had unsightly ankles, and they brought this horse from Florida to Del Mar to run, and no one told him, you know, that looks bad around these parts, right? We just don't have a lot of that. So we PET scanned him, and the PET scan was, you know, marginal. And we said, with the appearance, as people see that horse being led in the walk ring and out onto the track, and with the PET scan, probably best he doesn't compete around here. There's other places he can go, but probably best.
How much do you think that increases the risk of the breakdown with that? Or does the horse protect itself enough that we're not going to break him down at a great big percentage?
Yeah, again, Wade, I think if the horse PET scan's okay, fine. Those horses that don't flex much, they're older horses, they don't worry me in and of themselves. But if they don't have a good PET scan, I got a problem. Now, they would give you a fingerprint on that tracing, right, that would reflect their short stride. But if everything else checks out, I mean, that's how they are, and I would expect that horse to look about the same 8 months later, right, because he's got stiff joints. But if the bone scan checks out, the sesamoids are okay, I'm okay.
And then the other thing is, I think here we've been running a bigger percentage of quarter horses than we do, you know, the thoroughbreds. So my experience has been with the quarter horses, we break down more knees than we do fetlocks. Is that something that you see?
My colleagues in the quarter horses tell me that is true, yeah.
And then one more. When you were talking about your research that you know, that hasn't been reported on yet, but you had 25 horses that everyone agreed were okay, but yet some of them were not. How do you determine, I mean, like, if I say it's okay, Dr. Erickson says it's okay, the trainer says it's okay, everybody thinks it's okay, how do we determine that maybe that horse isn't okay?
Well, that's a great question, but you're going to have to trust me on this. I think, I've always said this, the PET scan is really pretty black and white. You know, if you see the sesamoid light up, it's turning yellow, going beyond the orange range into yellow, he just doesn't run, simple as that. But the good news is very few horses light up there. You know, I talked about this occupational disease type thing. You know, you're going to see that palmar cannonbone light up a lot. And we don't worry too much about it. But you're not going to see the sesamoid light up. Very few horses. But when you find it, you got to get them out of the racing pool.
All right, thank you.
Dan has a question.
Oh, you know, Joe, I'm not going to let you go that easy. No, I thought maybe you could just give a little brief statement on which of these is transportable, because we race on, you know, this huge area in Wyoming, you know, which ones could we move from back and forth if we could find somebody to invest in them?
Yeah. You can't move nuclear scintigraphy and you can't move MRI. MRI's got a lot of issues with electronics, and while it's in that enclosed container, there's a lot of infrastructure that has to be right. And you just can't, the instrument's too sensitive to pick up and put it on a truck and take it somewhere. CT is going to be too large to move around, although someone could put it in the trailer of a truck and transport it. I could see that happening. It would fit in a trailer of a truck. PET is very simple. You see that little machine there, and they put it in the back of a vehicle and they take it to different places. So long as you have the infrastructure in place to work with radioactive horses at each site, there's a lot of regulatory things hoops you gotta jump through, but moving the machine is no problem at all. And they do it a lot in California.
I know we have a hand. Commissioner Torgensen has a question.
Yeah, Doctor, just looking at, almost everything you talked about there was based mostly on bone. Is any of this technology going to be sensitive enough in the future to diagnose like possibly an impending tendon injury or something like that?
Well, none of the technology that I talked about would necessarily know. But there are new forms of ultrasound. Dr. John Peloso was based out of Florida, works with us a lot. He reads our MRIs for us. He has some interesting ultrasound that seems to have the potential to pick up pre-existing lesions. Fortunately, the ones in the soft tissue, which can, as you point out, can lead to breakdown, a relatively low percentage, but we'd like to catch everything, right? And so I have hope that John's technology might help us there.
Thank you. We have a question in the back. Or Tracy?
Thank you. Tracy Laycock, General Counsel for Wyoming Downs. Most of the commissioners are aware of this, but of course excited to report that every horse that raced at Wyoming Downs, both quarter horse and thoroughbred this year, ran with a Stride Safe sensor. So we're already doing that in Wyoming and collecting data. So just wanted to make sure everyone was aware of that.
Is that going to be information that you'll share with us?
So we did share with the commission on our one breakdown this year. We did share the Stride Safe information that we were able to gather from that horse. One of the things that's really important with Stride Safe is to get data from the horse in multiple times. So we really still in Wyoming are in the building phase. But I think that data is going to be very important for horse racing in Wyoming as we move forward.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would just add to that I'm proud of you that here in Wyoming, you're already getting ahead of the game, because we're not there in Southern California yet, and there's things that are hanging up the Stride Safe use, or maybe we should use somebody, a lot of egos in play, things like that, right? But that's great, because if you're going to exist on a top level, as a top level racetrack, and I think that's where you're headed, on the big stage, you got to get ahead of it. You got to get ahead of this stuff. You can't wait for the public to come knocking on your door and angry with your game.
Thank you. Just for the record, there's no egos in Wyoming. You had a question? Sorry, one more question at least.
Doctor, is California or any place?
Turn your mic on. Push your button.
I was going to ask if in California or anywhere that you know of, have they started to incorporate pre-existing injury screening into their regulations yet?
Well, there's the physical exam, which would tip you off to some form of lameness, but in capturing a pre-existing injury, as I was explaining, no. Other than particular clients who are diligent enough, they have a suspicion to run their horse through the advanced imaging on their own. What I'm advocating is we just do it for every horse, and get a baseline on them. I'll tell you this, trainers who are diligent and watch their horses train will tell me, when these things start niggling at a horse. If you watch them gallop every day, you see when they turn the corner. And that's when those trainers will send their horses in for advanced imaging. It's not everybody, but they're doing it on their own voluntarily. How much does the machine cost? It's around $1 million. I think when we bought ours, we were the first ones through the door, so we've always gotten kind of a break. No, that's the machine. And the facility is not too expensive. You just have to have it. But I'm telling you, it's a cost. Believe me, we were scared spending all that money, but it totally worked out. You know, we couldn't live without it.
What's the life expectancy of that $1 million investment?
Well, that's a good question, but I'll tell you this much. That is the beta unit that we have, and it's never had a bad day in his life, and we've had it since 2020. I think a horse kicked the detector tube one time, and we lost a day, and it was repaired. But boy, I mean, these guys, they're Russian engineers, you know, that are really in the human market, working in the cancer area. That's where PET scanning is really, you know, that's what PET scanning is all about. And they just stepped into this, not knowing anything about horses that I'm aware of, and designed this machine that is just incredible. I didn't show the machine in action, but the horses, if they want to move, they'll just step and the machine pops open and everything's fine. So we hope it lasts 20 years because we depreciate our equipment over 20 years. And that's been true for the nuclear scintigraphy. And then things start to give out where repair is more expensive than getting a new one, kind of. And so 20 years has gone by, we just buy another one.
Doc Erickson, you had a question.
So as far as screening horses, how do you anticipate As far as the screening process, how have you seen this applied, or how do you envision this being applied to cover all horses, or horses that have had other identified risk factors, or what have you seen?
Yeah, good question. It all has to be worked out. This is my vision to scan every horse. I think it's doable. It's very doable. But you get met with that, well, how will we know how often? Well, you'll work that out. We'll work that out. And there's smart people at the university that like Matthew Spree at UC Davis, that can begin to build the framework for how you select horses to bring them in, and then how often they need to be rescanned. Yeah, it's all going to be worked out, but it's doable. That's the good news.
And do you envision this being on the regulatory side, on the private practice side? What's your thoughts that way?
Well, it's already on both sides now, because the regulatory side will say to the private practitioner, hey, I think this horse should have a PET scan. And so based on their advice, keep them happy, give them what they want, because that's what they want. So we'll do that. And it may be in addition to other things like blocking the horse and whatnot to prove that it's indeed what they think it is. But it's already here. I think the awkward thing is in Southern California, we have regulatory vets and we have private vets. And then we have vets that work for the racetrack. So it's a devil's triangle out there. And so I think, just quickly, I'll say all vets should probably work under the same umbrella. Would be the best thing for horses.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Troy.
Charlie, you have a question?
Yeah, thank you very much, Doctor. I really appreciate it. So if I heard you right, $1 million for the unit, then you'd
Correct.
have staffing,
Staffing,
people.
correct.
couple people probably.
2 people at least. You need someone holding the horse. That's the most important person.
Right.
And then you need a technologist that's gathering the image.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So investment, 2 million?
Maybe. I mean, we have it all figured out cost-wise, and that thing's going every day.
Yeah,
A population of about 3,000 horses, they're all generally in the same spot usually. Our racetracks now are down in Southern California, we're down to just one operating at any one time. And then we have a vanning service that brings horses from the opposite track, because we want to keep all our staff in one spot, right? Even though the pet can move, the other stuff can't move, and they're running all that equipment. And so we have a service that brings horses up and takes them right back. That's been real helpful.
Thank you. That's half the Lizra that we send to Lizra. would
Yeah.
cover that.
Lizard grant money. All right. Thank you, Doc. Any other questions before we move on?
Bob's frowning.
Bob, you had a question?
No, he's just frowning.
Oh. Yeah. All right. Those are good questions. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate your time, Doc. All right. I think we have Gad.
While Spanky's getting ready, I'll introduce him quickly here. Spanky, I've heard you speak, and, great speaker, folks. He's a professional gambler, and he is going to give his opinions with sports wagering and kind of anything else that he kind of wants to jump into. And please pick his brain, talk to him. We appreciate you making the trip out here from New Jersey. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Charlie, for that introduction. I appreciate it. And hearing the doctor's presentation, I wish I could have these imaging. When I was thinking about betting on horses, the gambler in me was thinking, man, I'm just looking at racing form all the time. So it would be great for something to be available for the public for that. But that was great, doctor. Thank you. I represent here the American Bettor's Voice. As Charlie was saying, I'm a professional sports bettor. I've been betting sports professionally for about 24 years now, pretty much right out of college. I went to Rutgers University, graduated summa cum laude with degrees in finance and computer science. I then went on to work on Wall Street at Deutsche Bank, was making more money on the weekends betting sports than I was on my regular Wall Street job. So in 2003, I decided to, cut the ties and bet sports professionally, and that's what I've been doing ever since. So I appreciate it. I know you often don't have gamblers discussing here and presenting, so thank you so much, and thank you to the Commission for your service, and thank you for having me. Today we're going to talk about, let me tell you about how I got the name Spanky. My name is Gadoon Corollas. My friends call me Spanky. My mother was a big fan of the Little Rascals growing up, and I was always getting into trouble, and got into a little too much trouble, and then that was kind of her favorite rascal, and it just kind of stuck with me, and that's how I got the name. You could call me Gad, Gadoon. Most people can't say my name, Gadoon, so Spanky is kind of what stuck. Today we're going to talk about the organization I'm a part of and talk about bet limiting. So we just launched this nonprofit called the American Bettor's Voice. Our mission at the American Voice is to assist the sports betting industry in achieving a sustainable model by securing a seat at the table for the sports betting consumer and giving them a voice. Oftentimes, when any legislation or regulation is passed, you only hear the operator's viewpoint or the provider's viewpoint. You never really hear the bettor's perspective. And that's what here we're trying to offer that perspective to regulators, legislators. And we just launched in June. We had a presentation at NICOG's, the National Council for Legislators for Gaming States. I've been to other conferences, North American Regulators Association, NAGRA. And, we're trying to just spread the word. Anybody that would listen to us, to try to give a voice at the table and hear our side of, and because I think proper regulation can't be addressed unless you hear both sides of the counter. So that's kind of where we're at when it comes to that. Today we're going to just talk about bet limiting, which is the second bullet point, but a couple of things that we're doing at the American Bettor's Voice is regulator education and player advocacy. We've worked with the SBRA, the Sports Betting Regulatory Association, and that's how I kind of was introduced to Michael, who invited us to be here, and through Tom Sage at the SBRA, where we presented an educational presentation on sports betting. A lot of regulatory agencies don't understand really sports betting. It's still relatively new in our country when it comes to regulated environment. Of course, sports betting has been around on every street corner and barbershop and candy shop for God knows how long. But it's relatively new, and I think a lot of regulators think that it might apply the same to a casino You kind of, and that's apples to oranges. So we kind of want to shed a little more light on sports betting per se. Just our leadership, we have an incredible board. Myself, I'm the chairman of the board. We have our CEO, Richard Schutz, who's a former regulator in California. He also ran the Stardust Sportsbook, the legendary Stardust Sportsbook in Las Vegas. He was the CEO of the Stratosphere, which is that tall casino in Las Vegas. So he brings incredible expertise to our board. And then the list goes on and on. We have a Brianna Dora Shoal, who's into responsible gaming, worked at the National Council for Problem Gambling. Susan Hensel, who was in private practice now, but she was the director of licensing for the Pennsylvania Gaming Control Board. Harry Crane, professor of statistics at Rutgers University. Allison McCoy, who runs Nickel G's and who is 20 years of marketing event planning. And the list goes on and on. Brett Smiley, a journalist, Eric Raskin, our editor and writer, and Adam Robertson, a businessman. So we kind of have a wide array of experiences at the American Bettor's Voice to kind of be able to, share ideas and bounce ideas off each other to try to be able to represent the sports bettor in the best way possible. So I'm going to give a little bit of introduction on kind of how bookmakers make money, on why sports bettors lose money for the most part. A lot of this stuff could be basic, so forgive me if you understand most of it. So the graph on the left is, let's just say, if you're betting a coin flip and you have, if it lands on heads, you win $100. And if it lands on tails, you lose $100. There's no juice attached, and it's just a man-to-man price. You just bet one person against the other. Notice how in this graph, everything essentially, the graph is centered around zero. You're going to have upswings, downswings, but at the end of the day, that will always converge to zero because the 50-50 coin flip, there's no juice attached, there's no vigorish, there's no house edge. As opposed to the graph on the right, there is a house edge, and that's how the bookmaker makes money. For the bookmaker, if you're betting a coin flip, you're betting $100 to win $91. So when you win, you only win $91. When you lose $100. And notice how that's a downward slope. And the more and more you bet, the more you'll lose, and you'll eventually go broke. So that's how the bookmaker, and that's how most all gaming establishments make money. That house edge, that minus 110 odds, is what the bookmaker has at his advantage. To bet profitably, it's very difficult. You have to be able to get a win rate of 52.38%. Doesn't sound like much to be able to predict a coin flip over 53% of the time, but trust me, I've been doing this for a long time. It's very difficult. It's not easy, and most people the Las Vegas wasn't built on winners, it's very difficult. So let's just give a sports betting example. This Saturday, we got a big game, Boise State against Wyoming here, the Cowboys, 22.5-point underdogs. So let me kind of explain how this point spread bet works here. So Boise State minus 22.5. If you were to bet on Boise State, you would risk $110 to win 100. That's the juice. If you were bet instead on Wyoming, you take plus 22.5, you would risk, again, $110 to win 100. In order for the Boise bet to win, Boise State would have to cover the point spread, win the game by more than 23 or more points. So them just simply winning the game by 10 points, 15 points, that bet would be a loser because essentially you have to cover the point spread. As opposed in Wyoming, now if you bet Wyoming, you essentially have a cushion of 22.5 points. So if you bet Wyoming, they could either win the game outright or they could lose by less than 22.5 points and your bet would still win. So the bookmaker, how does he make money? The bookmaker is always going to make, if let's just say a bettor bets Boise State and Boise State wins, the bookmaker will lose $100. Okay, this is pointer as well. The bookmaker will lose $100, but if he booked a bet on Wyoming, he'd win $110, so the bookmaker would make $10. Same thing would happen if somebody bet Boise and Wyoming won, the bookmaker would make $110, they would lose $100 on a Wyoming bet, and they would make $10. So booking $220, the bookmaker, no matter what happens in this theoretical example, is going to make 4.54%. That's what we call the bookmaker's hold. That's the theoretical hold. Now in practice, this usually ranges anywhere from 3% upwards of 8, 9, and even double-digit percentages when you talk about parlays and different types of bets. I just wanted to illustrate a simple example on a straight bet to kind of get everybody acclimated to betting sports. Let's compare this 4.5% advantage to standard casino games. So roulette, the household is 5.3%. Blackjack, it's about 2%. Craps, 1.4%. Three-card poker, 3.4%. Slots, anywhere between 5 and 10%. So it's right in that range. The only difference is, though, bookmaking requires talent. So unlike a slot machine where you're guaranteed as an operator to make money, you have to employ proper talent for the bookmaker to make money because it is a dynamic market, it is a moving market. So if you don't have that talent, you can lose money as a bookmaker. There are several bookmakers, believe it or not, that have gone broke because they just did not have the skill level to be able to manage a market, move lines accordingly, and such. So that's the big difference between a closed game like blackjack or roulette or craps, and even in the horse racing world where it's pari-mutuel, where the earn for the operator is fixed. With bookmaking, you can lose money. Think about it. The point spread, I just gave an example on the point spread being 22.5. That point spread is going to be moving up and down depending on the action that the bookmaker receives. So if somebody laid 22.5, that line could go up to 24, 25, then he might write a bet plus 25, and the lines are moving. It's buying and selling. Think of it just like a stock market. You're buying and selling, and you have the market maker making that juice, that bid-ask spread, and you have to have it's a talent required to be able to effectively manage that market. Okay, so I'm here to talk about bet limiting. So this is what's happening now. When sports betting kind of came overseas, I have here the British influence. This is kind of a British invasion, we call it. It's not the good kind like the Beatles. What happened is a lot of in the UK, the bookmakers, they would use stake factoring, individualized bet limits. So they would essentially prejudice somebody for being too smart or too sophisticated. And they would give somebody a smaller limit on a game, and they would give other people that weren't sophisticated a higher limit. And that's what we call stake factoring. So when you walk in the door, your stake factor is 1. If you are very sophisticated, your stake factor can then go below 1. It could be 0.1 or 0.01. And if you weren't sophisticated, if you had propensity to lose, your stake factor then would go up to 5, 10, 20x. And that's kind of this model that a lot of the sportsbooks have adopted as regulation has passed in America. Of course, in Las Vegas, this could never fly. Las Vegas, imagine, somebody walking up to the counter and the bookmaker saying, yeah, you're great, you could bet $10,000 on a game, and then somebody like me walking up and hey, you only bet $10 on a game. Imagine the uproar of all the customers if they knew about that. It would never be able to fly. What happens now with the anonymity of the internet and the cloak of the internet is these operators are able to implore this strategy without the public knowing. It would never have flown in Las Vegas because everybody would just say, hey, that's not fair. Why is this guy getting so much more than me? And why am I treated unfairly? So this is what we call the ban or bankrupt model that's been brought over. Let me explain that for a little bit. The term ban or bankrupt describes the current operating model for the majority of U.S. retail sportsbooks. Again, as I said, if you show long-run winning tendencies, the operator will likely reduce or eliminate your ability to bet. If you show long-run losing tendencies, the operator will continue to increase your betting limits and invite you into their VIP concierge programs to extract more betting handle. So that's what's going on. Let's find out really quick how bad it is. And this is kind of I have a good social media following. So we have bet slips. I've asked everybody, if you've been limited, show me your bet slips. So I kind of just had a little collage of different type of bet slips. I'm not sure if anybody could see in the room, but we're talking on the Detroit Lions -3. Somebody's limited to $20.25. Over here, $26.99. $9.18. These are billion-dollar corporations that, my God, $9.18, if they tried to book a $10 bet, they'd start shaking. Just doesn't make any sense. We have $2.74, $18. If you look all the way on the right, the maximum allowed wager is 29 cents. You believe that? It's just incredible. And there's people that are limited to literally a penny. And this just goes on and on. This is just a collage and these aren't just regular prop wagers. These are on NFL teams or on college football teams, the KC Chiefs, Providence, the Cincinnati Bengals, Arizona Cardinals, et cetera. So it's gotten to be an epidemic, essentially, on how these operators are treating customers. And it's not just smart customers that are being treated this way. It's just customers that do homework, that are able to just read more, or that are able to analyze more, handicap a game more. And why should, why should that happen? Why should customers be treated that way? So you kind of think about it, in this banning, why it's wrong. It's a lack of fundamental fairness. It's un-American. If somebody gets in America, I've always grown up, if you get good at something, you're supposed to be patted on the back and say, hey, great job. Unfortunately, these operators, instead of just kicking you in the butt and saying, get out of here, we don't want your business. So laziness, incompetence, lack of talent, as I alluded to earlier, in order to be able to book properly, you must employ bookmakers. And this is a skill level. It's an art form that is passed on, that several Las Vegas bookmakers from the past are very good at it. Several offshore bookmakers are good at it. And a lot of old-time Las Vegas bookmakers, you have to have a propensity for mathematics and whatnot. And there's a lack there now. The operators these days are paying their traders, minimum wages, and they're not. They don't want to invest in proper risk management. Another reason why it's wrong, I think, is killing a dream. I think every sports bettor that I've ever met has this dream of not becoming a professional, but at least making a little extra money on the side. They take pride in betting sports. And I think once the word gets out now that if you get good enough, you're going to be shown the door, this kind of puts that glass ceiling on that dream, and nobody wants to do that. You're going to be driving players to the offshore markets, to that gray area, and nobody wants that because obviously you want to keep everything onshore here so that it can be taxed accordingly. Also now, if you're a player, if you have one of these DraftKings, FanDuel, MGM, if you have an account for a long time, if you're surviving, that's equivalent to you being an unsophisticated bettor. Essentially, the bookmaker is saying that, you know what, we believe you're going to lose long term, that's why you still have an account here. And that's kind of a slap in the face. A buddy of mine, he says, yeah, I've had this account for years. I'm not going to tell him, hey, they think you're going to lose. But that's exactly why you have an account for years, where most of the time there's people that get limited and get such an incredible reduction of limits within a day or two, within just a few bets. And I'll explain how that happens. So is this necessary? Does this model have to exist? And the answer is no. You don't have to limit sports bettors. There are regulated sportsbooks as well as offshore sportsbooks that don't limit sports bettors. An example is Circa, who's in Las Vegas. Circa, I think, is licensed in Las Vegas, Ohio, Kentucky. We have Prime Sportsbook, who's licensed in New Jersey, Ohio, and I believe Kentucky as well. And even Prime Sportsbook, we have this tweet that was just sent 2 days ago. Prime Sportsbook just says, at Prime Sportsbook, we believe different limits for different bettors is unfair. That's why all our members are guaranteed the right to wager up to a maximum amount on every betting market. This is what America should be. This is the fundamental fairness. These are privileged licenses. It's not an open market where people can choose. There are licenses granted by people in this room to these operators. And if you're going to grant these licenses, I think the one thing that these operators should do is treat everybody fairly. Nobody's asking for anything special, or they just treat people fairly. 29 cents, that's, I think that's egregious. Okay, let's talk about the bankrupt part of this ban or bankrupt model that we have. So the bankrupt, that's when things get, it gets serious. Because all I've been talking about is sophisticated or smart gamblers that do their homework. In the bankrupt model, the sportsbooks increase their exposure to unskilled bettors by increasing the amount they can wager per bet. They'll increase that stake factor. So if you're in a VIP program, your allowable bet size is increased by that factor. So if somebody, let's just say a $5,000 limit, if you have a millionaire, let's just say, he bets, his limit is $5,000. Okay, no problem. It's not going to hurt him. He's not going to go broke. He could bet $5,000. He'll lose, but it's okay. It's not going to hurt him. But what these operators are now doing is they're saying, you know what? You're a special client, because they know, given his bets and given his tendencies, that he's going to lose long term. They're now letting that player bet, let's just say $100,000 a game. So now if you're a millionaire and you're betting $100,000 a game, you don't have too many bullets to fire before you're busto. And that's what's happening. It's kind of a predatory where if you're too smart, we're going to limit you to 29 cents. If you're not smart, we're going to increase your limits to $100,000, $200,000, et cetera. And that's the range that exists in today's market. And of course, there's potential, responsible gaming issues, as I've just alluded to. You can't, you have to be careful with how you treat these customers when you increase your limits, because again, you don't want to bankrupt them. You want, to be able to take a little slice out of every player and feed the economy and and generate that tax revenue. You don't want to bankrupt anybody and have them be in the poorhouse or have different issues. Nobody wants that, and I'm sure problem gambling is a big, big thing for the commission and for every state and for every regulator, legislator we've talked to. Problem gambling is a big, big thing. And unfortunately, this bankrupt model is against that. So let's talk about if operators know that this limiting practice is wrong. The Massachusetts Gaming Control Board, they were receiving complaints from players saying, listen, my bets have been limited. And so they decided to have an open roundtable. They invited the operators to show up on May 21st of this year. And the operators, out of I think 10 or 11 licensed operators, only one showed up. The other completely missed the meeting. And the commissioners were pissed, rightfully so. They couldn't believe it. And the operators cited, some of the operators gave it the reasoning is we did not want to be in a public meeting and divulge our proprietary risk management strategy. In other words, they just didn't want to let everybody know that they're kicking out winners and increasing the limits on people that weren't winners. That's a proprietary risk management they were afraid to divulge. So then the commission then said, okay, we're going to give this another go. And then on September 11th of this year, they had another meeting. The operators this time showed up. And these meetings were all on YouTube, but I sent Mike here links to these, and I'd invite the commission to be able to check out some of these meetings, and especially the second one, to see the operators' responses. But some of the operators' responses, they blame the customer. Oh no, the customer, we don't. It's their fault. Other operators will say, listen, if we have to have a guaranteed limit for everybody, we'll have to reduce the number of offerings. And then another operator says, this is such a rare occurrence, it doesn't really happen too often. And the last one is something I kind of wanted to address. So a colleague of mine who's on our board, Adam Robinson, got this email from one of the operators about being limited. And I'm just going to read it out loud. And we just took out the, because this is a private email, we just took out the name of the sportsbook. So I'm writing to let you know that the betting limits on your sportsbook account have been reduced and you have been removed from certain promotions. These actions were taken by the risk and trading team as part of our ongoing review of customer accounts. Information about betting limits. Betting limits are different for different sports and markets. The limits get higher the closer it is to the start of the event. If you try to place a bet over the limit, the app will tell you what the current limit is for that selection. This is the best way to find out what your limit is for a certain selection. Notice how they didn't admit here in this email that they're individualized or completely targeting this customer. This was just, they didn't want to admit in this email that this was just an individualized limit. We're not able to provide any additional information about why these changes have been made to your account. If you have any questions that are not answered in this message, you can contact us by logging on to your Sportsbook app, tapping the account section, and choosing Chat with Support. My colleague did that, and they just said, listen, it's a risk management decision. There's nothing I could do. So back to the thing about them saying it's rare. If you notice, this email was sent from an account called Betting Limits at the Sportsbook. So if you have a dedicated email address called Betting Limits, you would think that it's not too rare. It pretty much happens pretty often. And I think that was such an eye-opening email that there's a dedicated email address to notify customers that their limits have been reduced. This happens on a daily basis, multiple times a day across the country. Okay, here's a big tell on exactly why the operators know what they're doing is wrong. So this is from the DraftKings 2003 10K annual report. This was just released by them in February. This is to all their investors. I'm just going to read it aloud. We follow the industry practice of restricting and managing betting limits at the individual customer level based on individual customer profiles and risk level to the enterprise. However, there is no guarantee that jurisdictions will allow operators such as us to limit on the individual customer level. So if you just think about that last sentence, that essentially is telling them, we know what we're doing is not right, and we don't know how long it's gonna last. Just to read further, it is customary for sports betting operators to manage customer betting limits at the individual level to manage enterprise risk levels. We believe this practice is beneficial overall because if it were not possible, betting options would be restricted globally and limits available to customers would be much lower to insulate overall risk due to the existence of a small segment of highly sophisticated syndicates and algorithmic bettors. Keep in mind, these are billion-dollar corporations and they're worrying about sophisticated algorithmic bettors instead of hiring their own. Or bettors looking to take advantage of errors and omissions on our platforms. We believe virtually all operators balance taking reasonable action from all customers against the risk of individual customers significantly harming business viability. We cannot assure you that all state legislation and regulators will always allow operators to execute limits at the individual customer level or at their sole discretion. Again, that last sentence says it all. If they knew that they weren't operating in a predatory manner, why would that sentence be in there? Why would they tell their investors that we don't know how long is this gonna last? So this is in essence is their hands in a cookie jar and they're just waiting for somebody to slap it down. And you know, it's up to different agencies and regulators to move forward with that. So what are our next steps? So now the Massachusetts Gaming Control Board, they just had a meeting today, just a few hours before this meeting, and they have agreed to send out a data request, finding out how prevalent is this limiting? What's happening exactly with the limit? So they've requested, they're gonna send out a data request to all the operators in Massachusetts saying who's getting limited, why are they getting limited? Who's getting not just their limits decreased, but who's also getting their limits increased? Why are they getting their limits increased? You know, are there problem gambling issues that we need to resolve? And this data request is in the process, and again, it's a slow process. Once you get the data back, then you're gonna have to analyze the data. And then once that data is analyzed, we believe that it's gonna show that this is a predatory practice and it should be resolved. So, recommendations. From the American bettor standpoint, we believe that there should be a house limit applicable to all. This is essentially the casino environment, the casino standpoint. When you ever enter a casino and you have a table game, you always see the minimum bet and the maximum bet. No matter what, you could always bet the minimum maximum. Now, if you're a VIP customer, sure, you'll be able to bet more than the maximum. You can't stifle the VIP customer base of the operators. You know, I think they say that 85% of the revenue is probably 10 or 15% of the customer base. So you can't stifle the VIP. However, we believe that there should be a uniform floor. There's not an NIP, a not important person. You don't want to penalize somebody. Sure, you could reward somebody for being a VIP for a good customer, but everybody should come in at the same limit, at a uniform limit, and everybody should be treated equitably and fairly. However, if you do offer extended limits to someone, the most important thing, of course, is you have to make sure that those extended limits will not exude problem gambling, will not exude a propensity to be able to bet over your means. Because you know, at the end of the day, in the gambling world, and it's a tough pill to swallow, but the problem gamblers are the sportsbook's best customers. So it's a kind of a fine line you have to walk to make sure that that you're not that the problem gambling issue is looked after. So that's all for me. I just want to thank you, everything. I'll open everything to questions. I'm happy to take any questions you want. Our website's bettervoice.com. I also run a conference called Bet Bash every August in Las Vegas, and I invite all the commissioners here to attend that conference. It's a sports betting conference where all the bettors collude with one another, and then we all kind of share ideas. It's run out of the Circle Las Vegas every August 12th through the 15th in 2025. So I'd like to extend that invitation to everybody here and kind of you'll be able to talk to bettors, learn from bettors. Sean Fluharty from West Virginia, legislator, was there last year. This last year, Tom Sage, who's the vice president of the Sports Betting Regulatory Association, was here, was there, and he loved it, and he learned so much. And hopefully, increasing education and kind of learning more about the business by hearing from bettors such as myself, I think can't do any harm for anybody. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Spanky. Do we have questions for Spanky?
President
I
Broussard,
know
we
we
have
do.
an online question as well.
Okay, who's that?
Commissioners,
Who is-
this is Tom.
It's
Tom Sage.
Okay.
I'd like
Tom,
to,
you have the floor.
Thank you, sir. Commissioners, Mr. Moore, thank you for giving me this opportunity. Spanky, great presentation. I just wanted to bring up.
Tom, can you hear me?
Yes.
Sage.
Do you have me? Hello? Hello?
Oh, yeah, Ruben? Yeah, Ruben, you asked your question.
Thank you. That's very good. I wanted to tell you, I'm a professional bettor too. I can make a large fortune betting on football, but I got to start with a little bigger one than that. So I guess what my big call is, they must be making money because Doritos and Budweiser quit advertising NFL football. MGM, those are your sponsors now for the football teams. So how do you put those kind of, how do you tell the online bettors that this is how you have to handle your betting in Wyoming or wherever you're going to do it?
So, I'm sorry, so the question is.
Well, you said we need to have uniformity in the betting. They can't have the good guys tamped down to a $5 bet and the boys that don't know how to do it $1 million. So how do you put those kind of rules and regulations and enforce them on them when you're just a little state?
Yeah, so I think, great question, and thank you for that. So we're now drafting, I'm working with Susan Hensel on our board to kind of draft legislation. West Virginia has reached out to us to try to maybe draft legislation to make sure that a house limit is standard. When you open up an account, when you sign up, and when you log in, that limit, you're always gonna get that limit. You can't have a stake factor below 1. So if and that's just a simple rule where if somebody would be able to say, everybody could bet, this is our house limit. You could bet as much as you want up to this amount in a game. If you have a stake factor of 1 or higher for VIPs, but if you have a stake factor of just 1, then the sportsbooks will have to oblige. And I think that's by either legislation or regulation to let the sportsbooks know that you can't have an individualized limit where you treat some people where you give them a stake factor of 0.001 and then another person a stake factor of 30 or 40. And I think by using it from the stake factor perspective is how that could be properly applied.
Thank you. Is Tom or Tim? Tom?
President Broussard, it's Tom Sage, and he is back on.
Okay. Tom, if you'd like to ask your question.
Good morning, sir. Can you hear me?
I do hear the voice.
I'm always here.
Sorry, guys. Are you able to hear me? I don't know what the heck's going on.
Okay, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Thank you. I really want to thank the commissioners, Mr. Moore, for allowing Spanky to talk about limitations. From the SBRA standpoint, we are really looking at this issue and think it's very important, not only for the fairness of the players, but more importantly, as regulators, we really need to look at the aspect of the tax revenue we're losing. So I was at Bet Bash, as Spanky had mentioned. Bet Bash was wonderful. Learned a lot. Learned there was way more people limited than I could ever imagine. And many of these folks are going offshore. And we're losing revenue for our states. So I would love to see Wyoming, along with many other jurisdictions, get together and see what we can do. Thank you.
Thank you. So,
Yeah, thank you, Tom, for that. That's a great point that Tom just made. The one thing you never want to do is you never want to push business outside of Wyoming. Just why? And these operators can handle this business. Again, if you, like the commissioner just said, every commercial, we're seeing, so many ads on DraftKings, FanDuel, so you know what? We might see one, instead of seeing Jamie Foxx tell me to play at the King of Sportsbooks 10 times, we might only see him 9 times. But that one commercial, you could maybe employ proper bookmaking talent to be able then to manage risk effectively and to be able to keep the business in Wyoming. It's just it's pretty, I think it makes sense. And if it doesn't, I'd love to hear a counter argument to it. But I just don't see why that wouldn't be adopted.
Thank you. Spanky, do you think is it your assumption that these decisions for limits are made by algorithms, not human beings? Is that?
Absolutely. Well, it's made by both, Troy. So, the one algorithm that all the sports books are using is closing line value. So what is closing line value? Essentially, they have a way to be able to know what your theoretical hold is. Remember how I said the bookmaker's theoretical hold is 4.5%? However, if I'm, let's just say, laying 5 on a game, I bet the Jets, let's just say -5. Now that line, let's just say, closes 8 by game time. So I laid 5, and unlike the pari-mutuel world in horse racing, whatever spread I lock into, that's a spread I have. So it's not like you get the odds at post time. You're locking in those odds before the match, at the time you place your bet. So the sportsbooks run a report and they say, okay, this guy bet -5, but the game is closing -8. This guy, if he continues to do this, he's going to make money in the long run. So people might ask, why should the sportsbooks keep this guy around? Unlike a closed system of like blackjack or craps, the sportsbooks have to understand winners are okay. You don't have to beat every single person. As long as you are able to move the lines accordingly and utilize that smart information to be able to deal a line that would generate more revenue for the house, that's all that matters. Essentially, the smart sports bettors are independent consultants. Richard Schutz, our CEO on American Bettor's Voice, I don't know, you probably heard of the name Billy Walters. Billy Walters is the best sports bettor of all time. He used to play at the Stardust, and Richard Schutz would always say, not only did we want Billy Walters to play at our sportsbooks, we encouraged it. He was a valuable, even though Billy Walters would beat them every single year, he would always come away with the money. They utilized that information to be able to deal odds accordingly so that they can have a better price to be able to beat the rest of the customers. And that's how proper bookmaking works. And unfortunately, because of this European invasion, they don't understand that. They essentially want to kick people out that have a clue, that have any type of clue. And believe me when I tell you, it's not just smart gamblers. There have been gambling writers. There are just regular lay people that are just have no idea, and they're limited unfairly. It's not just a professional. Even though I am a professional sportsman, I'm not coming at this from just a professional perspective. This is happening, and it's rampant across the industry at all. Even if you line shop, the sports books never encourage you to say, listen, if I play at this sports book, he has a game -5. This sports book has -5.5. This sports book has -6. Of course, everybody, just like we're shopping at a supermarket, a gallon of milk might cost a different price across several different supermarkets, so we're going to go to the cheapest one if we would like. That's exactly what these customers are doing. They're getting limited just for simple line shopping. It's incredible how rampant it is, and I think the only way the commissioner, any commission can find out is if you make that data request and ask to show me the data, show me why you're limiting, what metrics you're using to base. Is it algorithmic metrics? Is it a human? What's happening? They usually might put comments in every player's account. This is why he's limited. So only, I can't, I'm not on that side, Troy, so I can't comment on why it's on exactly what methodology they're using. I just know it's happening, but I think with a proper data request, we could definitely get to the bottom of it.
Thank you. Representative Newsom, you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is maybe a question more for Mike. Could this be done through rule, or would it take legislation?
So Is one of the biggest problems that the bettors who are limited are not explained? There's no explanation of why they're limited? Is that one of the gripes?
Well, that's a first step, and as you can see by that email, because the reason is that they were not going to say is, we don't like your business because your business is detrimental to our bottom line, because we don't have the proper risk management employed here to be able to handle that. That's the reason.
I'm just asking because what's the level of legislation we're talking about? Do we start small by, if we do get involved in this and the legislation, do we start by pressing small buttons instead of outlawing something completely? Go ahead.
My other question is there legislation out there that actually bans bet limiting anywhere?
Currently, no, but we're working right now with West Virginia to try to pass some type of legislation. We're drafting bills as we speak.
So there's none that exists. So basically, people are still allowed to do business as they see fit.
Yes, these sports books are able to limit customers and have them bet 29 cents, and other customers to bet 290,000. So that, and again, if this was an open market, usually the best will survive. Somebody, limiting somebody to 29 cents in an open market, they won't survive in their business. However, these are privilege licenses, limited privilege licenses on every state. So there must be some oversight and I believe, some type of oversight to not take this extreme measure and treat everybody fairly.
Michael, did you want to try to answer that?
Yeah, Mr. President, Representative Newsom, I'd have to take a look at that and get back to you. Wyoming statutes generally say, thou shalt adopt rules that are consistent with what other jurisdictions do. That may be arguably in conflict with what other jurisdictions do by our legislative mandate, but I'll take a look.
Thank you. Any other questions? Oh, sorry, Commissioner Wildcat.
So where do you see the trend? Do you see the limiting coming from the operators themselves or the risk management companies?
So the risk management companies, the operators usually have their internal risk management companies. Most of them don't employ outside risk management companies, but the ones that do are definitely coming because a lot of the risk management companies from overseas, Canby, I know is one of them. I think they're from Sweden. They're notorious for limiting. And again, I think it's the easy way out that they're taking. But also internal risk management companies are utilizing the limiting strategy. And again, I think it comes down to nobody knows about it. I'm sure, I don't know, by a show of hands, did anybody know that bet limiting existed before I was here today? Okay, so only Commissioner, it's kind of eye-opening when we present this because most regulators and legislators don't know that this is actually happening because it's never publicized, and we're trying to change that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Have you ever thought about maybe putting it out there or as you're waiting for legislation or rules to put in place, maybe as a qualification of licensure to not impose bet limiting?
Yes, we definitely will, but unfortunately the train has left the station at this point because we have, I think, 38 states now where things are just in the process. We would have loved to have been involved on the ground floor to be able, before a lot of the regulation has been passed. So we're kind of chasing the train now, and we're trying to find ways to be able to put Band-Aids and to patch this up instead of starting from scratch. But yeah, we have to start somewhere. And again, this is a labor of love for us at the American Bettors Voice. It's one of our key points that we just want people to be treated fairly. And I think, and I know Charlie, when he read the opening line, this is your service to the public. To be able to serve the state of Wyoming, the residents of Wyoming, it's very important. And I think just to put a patch on this limiting practice, I think it would be a step in the right direction.
Thank you, Spanky. You good?
President Broussard, Tom Sage had one other thing that he wanted to.
Okay,
mention.
Mr. Sage, go ahead.
Mr. President, thank you. I'm sorry, I don't know what Commissioner had asked about legislation. again, I'm not trying to represent, I know Wyoming law, but the SPRA really would like commissions to reach out to their licensees as their operators and find out, do they employ limitations? And if so, how many people are limited? What are the parameters of those limitations? We fully believe that all jurisdictions have that right to ask those questions. That may be the best starting point, and then find out where we need to go from there. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the commission? Any from out there? That was good presentation. Thank you, Spanky. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it, gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for having me.
I just like to say Spanky. All right, we're going to move to, do we need a break? Got a couple of, so we will take a, I have 3:10. Can we come back at 3:20? A 10-minute? All right, 10-minute break. Thank you. Okay, we're going to start finding our place here.
I know. Just today, tomorrow. I can give you some extra of those sheets too, or you can email me and say, hey, Sarah, I did it this day, and I'll keep track, whatever you have. And if you don't, yeah, Jake was just like,
I lost my pack.
he's like, I just did it. Yeah. Yes, we appreciate Never looked at it. I know.
Are we coming back on?
Yeah.
Right now. Okay, folks, if we take a seat, we'll get going again. Hello? Anybody hear me? Okay, we'll get going again. Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Nope. Just that you were here. Yes. Days that you spent reading. You're working on it.
Your seat, and we'll resume the meeting shortly here in a minute.
I can see everybody's here, so we will.
President Broussard, everybody is back
Yeah,
in the room.
see
We do
everybody.
have a quorum.
Okay, let's carry on. The next item on the agenda is the track safety reports. And I guess we'll start with, we'll try to limit each operator to around 15, 20 minutes, if that's okay. No more.
Okay.
Start.
President Broussard,
Wrapping the gavel.
Commissioners.
Thank you.
In your packet, page 28, you'll see a summary of the findings from the safety inspection that was done. I was just going to kind of do these in order of the way that the meet was run. So Energy Downs is first. If you look in your packet, you'll see this is kind of a living document, and we've met with all of the operators after the season and kind of went through these. What we have found a lot across the board with all three operators is that, you know, in practice, we have a lot of things that we just need to put in writing. You'll see in this document as well for 307 horse racing, on the status bars, it'll say in progress. Those are things that they're actually already working on. There's a couple that say blocked. Those are ones that, you know, upon review, it's not really safety related. For example, on this one, it says the appearance of the backup gate. So, you know, we kind of block that. That's kind of up to them. If they want to make it look pretty, that's on them. As long as it's safe, we're not going to hold that over them. Some of the other ones, obviously, completed means that they've already accomplished that as well. There's a few on here that are highlighted, that I have highlighted, just maybe are the most important ones. 307 and Wyoming Horse Racing both have a little bit of a disadvantage when they're leasing space. We identified, or the report identified, some hazards in the infield. You know, 307 is going to do what they can to work with the Camplex to have that removed, but it's highly likely that that's not going to be possible. But I did want to point that out, that, you know, they're going to do what they can. They can also speak to that if they've made any progress on that. As well as the area or the barn area perimeter fencing. We've also, that was identified kind of in the beginning, and before the meet even ran, they had already completed that. So the remainder of these, really, I think, we're looking for your direction as to how you want these handled. These are going to be annually done. I guess, what is your all expectation of the operators in completing these? You'll see on here when we get done with the tracks, the commission also has a little lengthy list of recommendations for things for us to do as well. So any direction you can give us as far as how you would like to see these handled and proceeded with and addressed moving forward would be extremely beneficial.
All right, thank you, Nick. Commissioners, would you like to, anyone like to handle that or start? Go ahead, Cactus.
Thank you, Mr. President. I guess I'd like to know which of these you feel can't be attained by race dates and why?
President Broussard, Commissioner Covello. We believe that all of those items can be achieved by next season. And as Nick Laramendi had mentioned, some of them already have. We addressed up some of them before we even ran the race meet this year in 2024. To the one point that Nick made about the fence in the infield at Campflex, I have already had conversations with the Campflex about that. At the minimum, we're going to take the wire down. The wood posts might remain, but they have agreed to do that much so far. But likely that the whole fence will come out. It's not used to what it used to be used for, so going to hopefully get that removed as well. But we feel very confident about the list and being able to get all these things done. And to that end, the inspection itself was a really nice experience for me and the track staff. We thought it went very smoothly. They were great to work with great feedback and recommendations. Really applaud the commission and Charlie and Nick for putting that together. I think it was nothing but beneficial for us and the track. If there's any specific questions about line items, we'd be happy to address, but we feel really comfortable about the list and addressing the issues.
I would just add, Kyle Ridgway with 307, that Jack and his team have had a lot of dialogue with the Campflex over the last 30 to 60 days. We have, this year's our last year on the existing contract at the Campflex, but we have received approval and exercised our option to extend additional years to run there. And as part of that process, Jack's been negotiating lease amendments that give us additional time at the Campflex facility. So there were some time limitations related to, I think we had basically like April 1 to June 30. And now we get to bleed into March a little bit and into July a little bit, which gives us more time. And the Campflex, I think Jack's got a great relationship with them, and they've shown a willingness to work with us to continue to make that facility focused on horse racing, which is really what it was designed for.
Thank you. Questions? Anybody have a line item that they're curious about? Well,
President Broussard, so would you just like us to keep in contact with the operators and just keep this document alive, and as things get kind of checked off the box, and then present that or include that in the submission before we start running next year? Is that
sounds
to
good
see where
me.
we're at?
Yeah. Okay. I think. Great. Yeah, Dan?
President Broussard, members of the commission, I went through these things real closely and not, I don't know why, but it seems to me there's a lot of this stuff that should be internal to the operators, but there's a lot of rules out there that we do not have in our administrative rules that we should seriously consider. I think HISA has done a really good job of codifying many of those rules, and I think the commission should look at which of these rules we should consider bringing in under our umbrella as administrative rules. And that would give certainty to everybody going forward. Thank you.
Any other comments, questions, concerns? Anyone out there?
You run
Okay. Go ahead, Jack.
Jack Greer, 307. To that end, I would say that even some of the policies and procedures around maintenance of the track, daily maintenance, inspection of starting gate, ambulance, and all sorts of those things, HISA has adopted some forms that tracks have to fill out in that regard. So that would possibly be a recommendation to the commission as well. It could be a uniform form across all 3 tracks that then the reporting's the same, the inspections are the same, instead of all of us having a different inspection and procedure for our equipment.
That was one of the things that came up in the conversation we had after we got the inspection report, was there were recommendations for policies and procedures on a variety of things. And so we started asking, are these policies and procedures that we're individually supposed to have and develop and present, which we can do, they exist. And I think, I don't necessarily want to speak out of turn, but it sounded like from the conversation that the recommendation was that all 3 tracks have uniform policies and procedures related to the ones that were in ours. So, we can provide what our existing process is, but it's certainly helpful if the commission provides a standardized format for what they're looking for when Jack wants to submit check-in, check-out log for horses when they come in and out of the barn area, or what the inspection manual is supposed to look like. Like, we have those things. Do we want those to be standard forms, or should everyone have their own process?
Thank you. Anything further before we?
President Broussard, I don't think there's anything further with 307.
All right, thank you. Appreciate it, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we're moving.
President Broussard, the next one would be the Wyoming Downs report. This is essentially the exact same thing. Starting on page 95 in your packet, you will see the summary of recommendations that were made to Wyoming Downs. I think one of the real important ones that's great to highlight is the railing. The railing was kind of highlighted in the safety report, and that has already been taken care of. The old rail was already removed, and Wyoming Downs will be installing the new rail prior to live racing next year. So that's a really good step as well. Likewise with this one, if you'd like, we'll just keep this as a living document, and as we start checking things off, we'll get everything done and have it prepared for live racing next year.
This is the document they submitted to us.
So this document, actually, Sarah Beth put this together for us. This is a summary of the entire 90-page report and every recommendation in a much easier to find format.
I would just, if we added columns for years, and that might help.
Yep, we could do that. And actually, I think on another one that I have that's online, I actually have completion dates.
Okay.
So we can track it that way.
Great, thank you. Cactus, you have a question? Go ahead.
Well, question for Wyoming Downs, same as I just asked those guys. Is there any of this stuff that you feel you can't complete by race date?
Commissioner Covello, Mr. Chairman, no, there's nothing on that list that we can't complete. As a matter of fact, I echo Jack's comments. I think it's a very useful tool for us to have this and have another set of eyes looking at the same stuff that we're looking at every day, maybe a fresh set of eyes, and point some things out to us. I think it's great. We welcome that kind of input, and that's the way we view it. It's not criticism as much as it is input. And so, as was mentioned, we planned the rail right off the bat. With the new owners, that was the first thing they saw. So we got to replace that. So it's, as Nick said, it's torn out. It was torn out at the same time that we had a crew there building a barn, and they had the right equipment. So we just had them go out there and spend a couple of days taking that rail out, and we'll have that installed this spring. Hopefully it's on the boat right now on the way. So, but No, I see no problem in completing any of those tasks, Commissioner.
Thank you. Any other questions for Wyoming Downs? No, I don't. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
So the document we're looking at, Nick, just to clarification, it says not started or in progress. That date was a specific date back.
President Broussard, on this one, that is correct. So this was as of the time that we had met with them, and we'll just keep following up with them between now and when we run again in May.
Okay. Thank you.
President Broussard, the next one will be Sweetwater Downs. It begins on page 171 in your packet. This one, same kind of thing. It's the summary of the recommendations. You'll see that there's been a few of these that are already completed, some that are blocked that really don't pertain to safety itself. There is one in here that I wanted to highlight quite a bit, and it was of course I didn't highlight it. It's the secure area. Wyoming Horse Racing has already worked with the Sweetwater Events Complex, and they've proposed an entire new fence around the entire barn and secure area that completely blocks off and secures that area, which is really fantastic too. So again, with this one, we will keep working with them and follow up and keep track of this before we start running.
Cactus would like to ask his question.
Same question. Exact same question. Is there anything on here that you don't feel you can complete by race date?
Did that catch you off guard?
Didn't catch you, but no loops there with the.
Just
if I may comment further. So I think this is a fantastic process. I love that everybody's got in front of them. I think it shows cooperation back and forth amongst all of the race providers, and it's, to me, an exciting direction that we're heading, and thanks for your cooperation.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner, for the comments. I would just add to what several others have already spoken about. When we got the safety report, we were actually going to put something like the checklist together, and we're really pleased and excited that staff had done that. And I think the fact that it's a living document is a great way for us to keep track of what's going on and where we are in the process and make sure we are addressing everything. And we actually used the safety report, extracted the items that we know we needed to discuss with Sweetwater Complex, and actually had a separate conference call with them. And they were incredibly helpful and very supportive in the process. And the fence was one of the areas as well that we were able to get almost immediate sign off on. So we're going to start working on that right away. So it's just been a great process and helpful. And I think all of us are after the same thing. We want to continue to have elevated safety and elevated meets every year. And I think the tool is a great process to go through. And just anecdotally, we were able to get an extra week access to the track earlier for us. I know that's been one of our big headaches. We really talked a lot with Sweetwater about that, and at least for next year, for sure, and maybe in future years even more. So we're going to continue to push them to get earlier and earlier access. So
great. Thank you. Any questions of these folks? Anybody out there? The other operators? Your chance? No. All right. Thank you. Appreciate it. Nick, is that all we have on that item?
President Broussard, so those are the three tracks. Now I would just point your attention to page 257. And this is to Commissioner Schiffer's point. These are the recommendations by ERGM to the commission. A lot of this is implementing rules and standardizing a lot of the things that Mr. Ridgway had talked about, certain forms as far as standards go for the starting gate, the equine ambulance rules, the requirements for those things. So on this one, really what I would be looking for from you all is, I guess, your direction on how you would like these to be tackled. It looks like the vast majority of these are going to fall under, I guess it would be chapter 8, 10? No, 8. Yeah, chapter 8 rules. So I don't know if we just need to look at this as almost a complete revamp of chapter 8 and start implementing some of these changes, or if there's anything in here that you all feel are unnecessary.
Well, I think for those of us on the commission who are interested in rules, maybe we could do a small committee of people who could give some input first and then bring that to the commission. Is that something you guys would be interested in? I know Dan wants to volunteer. Roger? What, we don't need to have all the names right now, but if that's something we'd like to move towards and then tackle the lion's share of it and then maybe bring something partially put together for us to look at.
Yes, Mr. President.
Yes, sir.
I tried to answer your question there, but I hit the wrong button. But yeah, I'd be interested in that, and I think standardizing a lot of the things the way that they recommended doesn't just make it easier for them because they know what's expected, but it makes it easier for us because we're looking at the same thing every time.
All right, so Dan, if you want to head that up, and maybe I wouldn't have to be just commissioners, but if you want to get a working group or task force together.
Mr. President, would it be possible just a standing safety committee to do this? Would that be appropriate?
Sounds great. So we have 2 volunteers, and we can talk later, but if you want to recruit people after the meeting or during the break, then get those names together, that'd be great. Nick, is that a direction you were hoping we'd go?
I think that'll be extremely helpful.
Or did you want to do it yourself?
I would rather not.
Okay.
President Bouchard?
Yes.
We already have a standing safety committee that we can, everybody on that, because then it'll have operators.
Do you have the names of those folks, or? Okay.
Yeah, we do.
Okay, well, we'll just,
That's not what I was trying to say, but
we'll just defer that to the existing safety committee then.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Thank you.
I knew that. All right, thank you.
President Broussard, the last thing I'd like to highlight is this will be an annual inspection. Under the rules that were adopted, these will take place every year. And, it'll continue to grow and help keep the tracks, up to industry standards as things progress. So I think it's important that, we've done this, and I think it's been extremely helpful for all of us.
Thank you, Nick, great job. Okay, so if that's the last topic on item 6, I do think the executive session is something we needed to go into for a minute. So we need a motion to go into executive session by someone.
so moved.
And a second. And we'll, thank you, any question or comments about that? I don't guess it's, Charlie, you have something to comment?
President Broussard, the motion would be to go into executive session pursuant to Wyoming statutes 164405A, Roman numeral 9, to hear from Mr. Kaler on some legal matters.
Okay, any other comments? We have a motion and a second. Any more questions about that? We'll vote on it. All in favor of going into executive session, state aye.
For the public and everybody that's joining us today, at the end of the executive session, there will be no action. We will adjourn the meeting, and we will see you over at Rocca's Pizzeria on 430 South Ash Street at whenever you get there.
Is there a start time, Charlie?
It says 6:30, but I
Okay.
think we're,
Officially at 6
Okay.
when the reservation starts, but you could go anytime before that.
Okay.
until the room is reserved.
Okay, thank you.
Walk into Rockets, there's a room off to the left. That is where we will be. There will be reserves and things. There will be servers that will be there that can help you get through.
Thank you. See y'all later or tomorrow.